So let's assume your scene doesn't take place in the depths of space. We can come up to this button right up here and go down to shapes and add a plane. Now, the quickest way to center the camera up is to come up to your outliner, make sure you click on the plane. Now, when we hit F on the keyboard, it'll move us to it. And now you can hold the Alt key and left click, and you can move your camera right around the object in like an orbit perspective. So here's our plane. Obviously, we still can't see anything. So the next thing we're going to need to do is add a directional light. We come back up to the same button, go to lights, directional light, and now you can see our nice, beautiful white plane. But now let's assume that you want to extend it a little further and have a more conventional starting point to work with. So now what we can do is come back up to this button yet again. And what we can find in here is under visual effects, we can add a sky atmosphere. So now we have a basic blue sky in here, and you can also see the sun appears and it follows our directional light that we added earlier. So now what we can do is come up to the outliner and select the directional light. And now a quick tip I like to do in my projects is go to the details of the light, and mostly anything you drop in here that you need control of later. I like to just set the values all to 0 so everything's in the center. And while we're here, let's go ahead and move our plane to the center as well. So come to the outliner, select your plane, go to the details, let's center it up, 0, 0, 0. Now we can go to the directional light here in the outliner, go to the details, and I've actually set it too high. So even 5,000 was way too high, 1,000 is too high for this specific project. So let's take it down to 200 so you can see it. So at 200, there it is. It's floating right above our plane. And now we can easily rotate it with our rotate tool, and you'll see the sun actually moves and changes color depending on the part of the sky it's in. So there's a really nice sunset. And the automatic brightness that's happening, that's the eye adaptation. And we can actually make modifications to that as well. See, I just put a cube in here so we have a little bit more dynamic lighting to look at. So what you'll notice is if you actually come in here and you start looking down at this ground, notice how bright this white is. This white is completely blown out. If you had detail there, it's not there anymore. And that's because it's kind of taking this information right here and adjusting the brightness automatically, which is how a real camera would work in real life. So it's kind of nice and seems natural, but you can see when we look back out, now this has gotten a lot darker. So there's this constant changing value of your brightness levels, which can be an issue if you're trying to make your level look a certain way. But if you want a natural look, I mean, this is how the human eye and cameras actually work. But now let's say we want to set the value somewhere and we don't want to have to keep dealing with this weird fading in of light and everything. So in order to do this, it's super simple. We need to come up and add a new object. Under visual effects, we want to add a post-process volume. The post-process volume actually has a invisible like box around it. And you can see that's right here under brush settings. It's currently set to 200 by 200 by 200, which means if you're within 200 units of this box, it's going to apply the effect that we're putting on this post-process. So this is super useful, especially for like certain areas you want to change the lighting and make it look different. But in my case, typically more often than not, I just come right here to the infinite extent and I just check that box, which basically means anywhere on the map, does not matter if you're in that cube, you are going to be affected by this post-process. Now back up at the top of the details panel under lens, we want to go to exposure, and this is where we're going to find the minimum and max EV. And this is what's going to allow us to change that automatic brightness setting. So now if you just play around with these values, it'll set how dark the scene can get and how bright the scene can get. Now personally, what I like to do is actually set these to the same number so that I remove the automatic brightness thing completely. So let's just set it to 5, for example. So now we set our min and max to 5. Now you can see the scene's a lot darker. It almost looks like we have sunglasses on. And that brightness level does not change, even if we leave and look at a different object. Now, ideally, I don't think I want it to be this dark, so I'm going to bring that closer to 0. But you can see actually 0 is too bright. Let's actually go ahead and increase it to 3. Yeah, that feels about right. So I like the way 3 looks. The shadows have a darkness to them, but they're not completely black. and we still have the white detail being preserved. But now let's say you want to go a little deeper. I will say that sometimes shadows get too dark. And if you want this to be realistic, like real life, there's a sky up here and there would be ambient light bouncing off the sky down here. Right now, Lumen is allowing some light to come off this white and bounce up here. That's what we're seeing, but we're not getting any skylight. So once again, we come up to the button up here and we're going to add another light. And this one is going to be the skylight. Now, already you can see there's some blue tint in the shadows now, and it's a little bit softer overall, and you can see more detail in the shadow. So now that is light that's simulating from the sky, it's being bounced down, and you'll mostly notice that in the shadows, although it's technically over the entire scene. We haven't had to change the sun brightness or the skylight brightness or anything, but that's super easy to do. We can come into the outliner, go to the directional light, go to details. There is tons of settings in here that I'll go over in future videos, but the basic ones for now you're gonna be looking at is intensity. That's how bright your sun is. You can change that. You can change the color of the sun right here. And you can say, hey, do you want to cast shadows or not? So we can turn shadows off just with a click of a button. We can say affects world, which basically just disables the sun. So now our scene's looking better than ever. So now the next thing you could do to advance your scene further is come up to this little box again and go to visual effects, and you want to add an exponential height fog. Now right away that got rid of this ugly black abyss below us. So that's kind of cool that it can kind of blend that out a little bit too. But now we actually have the sun. It's kind of going through this atmosphere of fog and kind of nicely blending out. It looks really cool. So it makes the scene look more real because in the distance, objects would begin to become more foggy as they get further away. Now, of course, you can change the intensity of the fog. Just in the details here, fog density, we could turn that back down. You could turn it up so that things get more fogged. So yeah, you can just play around with that. Now to take this to the next level, typically what I would do is come down and check volumetric fog. We turn that on, and that is going to add some really nice volumetrics with our lighting. You don't see any God rays from the sun right now, and typically you would want that if you want like a realistic look. So if we go back to our directional light, now that we've put the fog in and turned on volumetric fog, come down to light shafts and turn on light shaft occlusion. And now you can see we have a nice little God ray kind of peeking through. That really does add a nice little touch of lighting detail. So now we've got some nice little God rays happening here in our scene with our atmospheric and volumetric fog. We've got our directional light, we've got our skylight. Everything is looking really nice and even. We use the post-process volume to set our brightness level the way we wanted to. So now your lighting is set up in your scene and you can see everything. You got some nice realistic lighting. You are good to go to continue to build your project now and have a starting point with your lighting.
Thank you so much for watching today's video. Leave me a comment, let me know what I can improve on for future tutorials, or ask any questions you may have and maybe we can have the community answer them for you. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell if you want to be notified when I upload new content. And remember guys, the only way to master something is by consistently learning more and more over time, and soon enough, you'll be an expert.